encrypted. Encryption is really, really bad when all of a sudden you find out that all of your information, you try to access your work-related information. You click on it, you try to open it up, and all of a sudden you get a note from a guy by the name of Yuri who lives in the Balkans, and Yuri tells you that unless you pay $500 in Bitcoins, you're not getting your stuff back. Usually in many small businesses and school districts, they call the IT guy up, he can't get access to the information. You bring in your favorite consultant who will charge you $5,000, and you know what they're gonna tell you? They can't access it. You're gonna contact law enforcement. I used to get these calls all the time. And this would be my answer. As long as you have a good backup, you're going to be okay. Then I'd put the phone away from my ear and I'd count to 3. And if there was dead silence, what did that mean? No backup. No backup whatsoever. And we have to understand that it's important to back up our information. You get ransom on your network, that the bad guys can steal your information. I would always ask, what do we do? Do we pay? Do we not pay? And I would always go like this, it depends. How much information of yours is encrypted? And I hate to say this, but the average small business or medium business would say to me, all of it. How long can a business survive without access to their information? And that's called the pay and pray method. And that is why backing up information is so important, and we need to start thinking about different strategies. What else happens on a regular basis? Think about this in your organization. All of a sudden, the person who's handling payroll gets an email from one of the administrators saying, let's just think this happens on, let's say, March 10th. Someone, your new person in the payroll department, human resources, gets an email from their boss saying that we have to pay taxes, there's been an issue, we need the 1099 information of every single employee within the organization, and we need it immediately. What does the new payroll person do when they get an email from the boss asking for sensitive information? And at that point, they take that information, they compile it, they send it off, and overseas, a bad guy in West Africa jumps for joy and goes like this, yes, I got it. And he's sitting in a room with probably 30 other bad guys, and they all look around, and he goes, what do you got? And he goes, I got the names, dates of birth, social security numbers of every employee in this US organization. And he goes, I have a deal for you today. I'm going to sell this information 3 for $10, 7 for 20, because that's all your information is worth. And then I get brought in all the time. I would get these calls. I had 5 of them in 1 week, and everyone would go like this, we don't put that information on our website. How do the bad guys do that? Now, when I was with the FBI, we had access to top secret computers, and I would go to LinkedIn, because what can I find on LinkedIn? Every single person within your organization who has that, and everyone would go like this, I can't believe that happened to me. How did that happen? What else would I see on a regular basis? All of a sudden, right now, I'll put it to you this way, whenever I get an email from my school, my kid's school principal, I read it and won't click a thing. Why is that? Let me ask you a question. How many people here are using 2-factor authentication on their work email? All right, we have a couple of you over here. How many people are using 2-factor authentication at home? I bet I'm going to make all of you do it afterwards, because you're going to understand the significance and the importance of this. So all of a sudden, a Facebook account belonging to the school gets compromised, and a Facebook message goes out to everyone on the list, which is what? The parents, and it says, we have this great new corporate partner lined up. All you need to do is fill out this quick survey and click on the link, and you will get a grande latte from the school. Because nobody believes a school will give out a venti latte, but a grande or a tall will do that. What percentage of the parents, and let's say for any of my marketing folks out here, what percentage, if this is legitimate, would you want people to click on that link? What percentage? I think they're saying 100%, right? But right now, the bad guy has just taken over that account, and now everybody is sitting here going like, now everyone whose computer was not up to date because maybe there was a flaw in Adobe or Java, you know, when are those really ever up to date? And now the bad guy has just infected every single individual within the district. And everyone goes like this, how did this happen? And they go over, and who do they blame? They blame the IT folks. And I go, I've never met an IT person in an organization that really is responsible for the social media accounts. And I always go like this, are you guys using two-factor authentication? And usually when I talk to the person who's in charge of the social media account, and this is Fortune 500 companies too, they go, what's that? So let me give you quickly the 4 things that are involved in every one of these elements that I've seen. Nobody ever expects to be a victim. I hear this all the time. I'm not a big healthcare company. I'm a nonprofit organization. I'm not a big school district. We're not big targets. Every single person, especially home users too, everyone is being targeted these days. If you have an email account, if you have a social media platform, the bad guys are trying to get into it. And one thing that I think we don't really realize these days, the lack of sophistication that is involved with committing cybercrime. As I mentioned yesterday in the breakout that Doug and I had, cybercrime is a $3 trillion problem. And in the next 5 years, it's going to go up to a $6 trillion problem. It is going up 100%, and that's pretty scary. But the next number scares me a little worse, because today we spend $88 billion on information security. We spend it on firewalls. We spend it on antivirus. We spend it on some of the greatest myths that I think that people fall for all the time. I sit down with organizations. I go, hey, what's your security strategy? And they go like this, I'm PCI compliant. And I go, so was Home Depot, so was Target, so was JP Morgan, so was Sony. Hey, I got the names of those companies that did those assessments. They're all good. You want them, you can probably get, if you use those things, you can probably get a better price. And then the consultants all get crazy because everyone's compliant. Compliance is not the same thing. Bad guys are looking to take out email accounts. We're looking at that. The business email compromise, a $15 billion scam, is taking place every single day because the bad guys are compromising email accounts. I see this all the time. Had one instance, the largest one that I worked on, bad guy got into the email account. So for everyone here who has two-factor authentication, all 3 of you, I think it is, you got nothing at all to worry about. Everybody else, this is the same scenario that plays out. CEO's email account is compromised. Bad guy reads every single email. He looks at it. He sees what's going on. He sees there's a large business transaction about to take place. So he looks, he reads, he waits, and at the right moment in time, he sends an email to the CFO, picks up on the communication and says, hey, the business deal is about to go through. I need you to wire transfer the money to this bank account. What does a financial person do when they get an email from their boss asking them to do something? What do? They do their job. How much of our lives are done over email and clicking on links? So at that point in time, the CFO contacts the bank, does the wire request, and this is why the banks are never the victims, because the bank calls the company up and says, are you sure you'd like to wire transfer that money? And unfortunately, what does she say? Yes. And at that point in time, the wire transfer goes overseas to another account. And in Nashville, I've seen $100 million worth of reported losses. And the thing that I think the hardest thing for corporate America or individuals to understand is once the bad guys get your stuff, it's very, very difficult for law enforcement to get your stuff back. That's why the responsibility is coming back. I hate to say it. It's coming back on the victim. You have to know what are your digital assets. You have to know what you need to protect. And that is very, very challenging because in most organizations right now, in the old days, we used to call it shadow IT. Today, I call it something different. You know what it is? It's the cloud. And everyone goes, the cloud. I go, yeah, because I can sit down with any organization, meet with their IT folks who say, hey, we got everything under control, and then we can find 27 separate cloud accounts that are out there that are outside of the world of IT. I sat down with a board of a very large company, and they're like, our cloud is completely locked down. And I go like this, are you using Evernote? They're like, oh yeah. Are you using Trello? Yeah. Are you using Microsoft 365 without two-factor authentication? They're like, yeah. I had to stop because I was about to get thrown out, and they were a client of mine. I had to, be a little nicer to wait to get paid. But that's what we see on a regular basis. So once the bad guys get your stuff, it's very hard, very, very difficult. And I can't tell you, and Doug's going to talk about that a little more, on how many different social media accounts are being used at different organizations. The next thing is the chances of us putting the bad guys in jail is very challenging because the bad guys are located overseas. When I started as an agent in Syracuse, crime was more of a localized problem. We worked with state and local cops. We put bad guys in jail. Today, the bad guys are located over in China. They're located over in Russia. They're located over in Nigeria. We just indicted 7 Iranians who were hacking into US universities to steal intellectual property. And I can guarantee you in every, what are we talking about? Sensitive research. I can guarantee you that nobody thought that they were going to be a victim. And we just indicted an individual from North Korea. Very, very challenging to put people in jail. And a lot of times, I usually ask people, how does that make you feel? How does it make you feel that it's when the bad guy steals your stuff, it's hard to get back and it's hard to put people in jail? And usually people become very defensive and angry with me, which is always fun for me. I always like to do that, I'm going to be honest. Which leads me to my last point. Almost 90% of what I've dealt with in my career could have been prevented through basic user education and awareness, two-factor authentication, and good defined business policies. And then I sit down with organizations and they go like this, hey, I got the greatest firewall in the world. And I go, that is a great firewall, but that wouldn't have stopped 90% of what I've dealt with. Well, we got a great endpoint solution. And I'm like, okay. So let me explain to you what is today's typical data breach. And I want you to put yourself in this scenario, look at it within your organization. You don't even have to answer my questions, just don't make eye contact with me because I can see how when you look at me, what's going on. So picture the individual, whoever it is, the highest person in your organization gets an email from somebody they know and somebody they trust. Happens every single day. In this situation, it was the CEO of a financial services company. He gets an email from an attorney. The email says it's related to a conversation that they had, because in this case, the third party's email was compromised. So the attorney's email was compromised. Bad guy reads every single one of his emails and understands what's going on and says, I have a very, very important document that I need you to review. And here is a PDF file. I used to give really bad advice. I used to say, if you get an email from somebody you know and somebody you trust, shoot them, and you're not expecting it, shoot them back an email and say, did you mean to send this to me? So the CEO listens to my advice and he sends an email back to the attorney whose email account was compromised and said, did you mean to send this to me? And what did the attorney say? Of course. At that point in time, there's a PDF file which is in the email. He clicks on the PDF file, but there's no So at that point, it turns into an HTML file, and all of a sudden what happens? A screen pops up that says you have a very important DocuSign document that you need to sign. Everybody here familiar with DocuSign documents? We get them all the time. Well, in this situation, picture it in your highest person in your organization gets this, and the next screen says, in order to view this DocuSign document, you need to provide your Microsoft 365 credentials. True or false? Do you need to provide Microsoft 365 credentials? And everyone at your organization knows that. That's part of training, right? Can you guys tell when I get a little sarcastic? Sometimes it all sounds sarcastic, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't know up until a year ago. Well, here's what happens next. He enters in his Microsoft 365 credentials. That doesn't work, so another screen pops up. It says, if your 365 credentials don't work, please enter in your Gmail credentials. So what does he do? He enters in his Gmail credentials. That doesn't work. It says, if that doesn't work, enter in your iPhone credentials. He enters in his iPhone credentials, and all of a sudden, that doesn't work either. He tries to get in touch with the attorney. He gets distracted, but we don't see behind the scenes is a 16-year-old over in Nigeria who has no background in technology at all, just captured username and password for this organization. What can a bad guy in West Africa, Russia, or my 16-year-old who's sitting in his room on the computer way too much, what can any of those individuals do if they steal the credentials for an organization that is not using two-factor authentication? I'm going to put you guys on the spot. I need an answer. What are they going to do? What's that? No, without two-factor. They're going to do everything, okay? Yeah, they're going to do everything. So right now, unfortunately, and Microsoft 365, unbelievable product. It's great. But what is 365 attached to today that it wasn't attached to years ago? OneDrive. And what do you think the average attorney keeps in a OneDrive folder? What does a healthcare company keep in a OneDrive folder? What do you keep in a OneDrive folder? And I know nobody has this. The number one document that's always discovered in the OneDrive folder is that list that says password file, right? And now bad guy gets password file. And now, depending on the size of your organization for intrusion response, and I do a lot of work with Kroll, which is the gold standard in intrusion response, 5 figures, 6 figures, or 7 figures to have come in here about that mess. And you know what they're going to tell you at the end of the day? It was the advanced persistent threat. You don't stand a chance against those adversaries. And you know what I'm going to tell you? It was a 16-year-old who stole your username and password. So that is probably, in my opinion, the number one thing. I do not go into situations right now. In the past 4 years of my career, I have dealt with very few things that could not have been, they all could have been prevented. There's still a lot of network-based attacks, but where are the bad guys going after? They're going after the end users. They're going after where is the information. Where was the information years ago? It was inside the perimeter. Where is the information now? On Evernote, in the cloud, and everything like that. These are the things that we see on a regular basis. And within schools, what do you guys have responsible for now? Kids. And what are we dealing with now? We're dealing with many situations where social media is being used. Social media is in play. We're seeing a lot of new threats that are going on. And with that, I want to really turn it over to Doug, because he's going to talk a little bit about some of the things on this new threat vector that I was just introduced to a couple of months ago. I have 30 years. Don't sound short, buddy, okay?
How many of you change your password every 6 months? Every 3 months? Every 1 month? That. Well, these guys changed their password every single day, and they still got hacked. Inappropriate content was posted, and we now work with them to avoid that from ever happening again. Imagine if a bad actor, like Scott mentioned before, posted a malicious coupon to your parents, your students, and they got infected with the virus, or their credentials or information was stolen. It would be on you guys, because you own and operate that social media page. and they are trusting you with that security. Social media, in general, allows us to do a lot of things, right? It's a data dump. So much information is being posted. How are we aggregating that data, and what are we doing with it? Unfortunately, we live in a different time, and Scott knows this much closer than I do, but school shootings and threats happening around schools and even in the office are happening at a crazy rate, right? But what are the common themes that we're seeing throughout all of these incidents is that, posts were being made on social media. There were early warning signs as far as people showing signs of emotional stress. Scott, can you talk to any particular incident where you thought about or heard about someone making posts or insinuating a potential threat or an action?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'll say I played social services worker way too many times in my career when we would have to respond to bomb threats and all those types of things, or threats of life that unfortunately were all pranks. So what did we have to do? We had to go out, we had to get, their access to the Facebook account and access to the social media platforms. And what did we eventually discover in these situations? There were really early warning signs that, there was indicators of this type of behavior. It's also the same thing with a lot of the terrorist cases that have been worked out there. These individuals are out there, and what are they doing? Now that what are we using social media for to express ourselves? Good, bad, and ugly. And now, on a lot of these things, especially in some of, the last shooting that was over in Orlando, everybody was getting blamed for the fact that this kid was making threats before, had some really, really radical behavior, and then everyone loves to play Monday morning quarterback. Now, when you have a cybercrime incident, that's one thing. You're going to deal with it. You get hacked into, there's cyber insurance, there's all types of things to pay for that stuff. But now when everybody starts second guessing things like this, how come you're not doing those types of things? And then, and that's why, going back to you, how come can't we just look at this stuff on our own? So if my kid's school system, Hillsborough Middle, can't the SRO just go through all that stuff on his own every morning?
Throughout the Southeast, I work with county and local law enforcement and school districts as an administration. Right now, the common theme that I'm seeing as far as reacting is you see something, you say something. That's fine if you come across that, right? We rely too much on chance that someone saw something and told the other person, right? Well, if you think, if you have over 1 million students in your district with 2 parents each, that's 3 million people. They might be on 2 or 3 social media channels. So we're talking between, upwards of 10 million platforms. If they're posting one time a day, that's millions and millions and millions of pieces of data. Even if you hired someone to scan this manually, you could not do it. So we need to stop relying on chance. Don't get me wrong, there's no solution out there that's going to pick up every potential threat. But what we try to do is help law enforcement shrink that gray area that's on the scene, right? So, like I said before, we're over-relying on that see something, say something, and having some sort of early warning system that's constantly scanning this data for those threats within a particular location so that you guys can take action, your SROs can take action, or there might be, a scenario where there's not just, an imminent threat of a shooting, but gang violence, hate speech, bullying. These are all incidences that I'm coming across and concerns when I talk to folks outside of just Virginia, but everywhere in the Southeast and across the country, right? So we have protest language. I just spoke in Prince George County, Maryland, with their entire SRO team. They have a massive drug problem. Kids are creating Instagram pages with bit.ly links in their profiles to go purchase drugs online. So if we're able, and they're all public pages, so we can pick that stuff up, alert the SRO, potentially avoid drugs being on campus, and who knows what other type of weapons that they're talking about and bringing out to campus. So these are the type of things that we're looking for, and essentially we're not surveilling anyone in that sense. We're picking up threats, right? So we're trying to look for that threat no matter where it's coming from, so that you guys can make your community safer and your schools safer. So what I want to show you here is, it's a little difficult to make out, but this is going to be posted on the website that you guys can access all this information. Some of the folks that I talked to have created a 10-step plan on how to make their schools safer. And amongst all of these, you'll see contract the vendor with possible safety and security threats, so that they know what's going on, right? So, and it's not just with schools and locations and students, right? Administrators have to make very important decisions that some people like, some people don't like. People can get very mouthy on social media, make certain threats. But how do you know that that's not real or not? That's up to you to make the determination, but if you don't see it, you don't know what's there. For instance, this is a county where Scott lives. I worked with the sheriff there to implement what we do as far as threat detection. And like any solution, there has to be a process. Scott talks about business practice and processes all the time. With any solution, you have to create a process, right? So what Williamson County ended up doing, creating this 3-level threat detection and response. Now, they worked very, very closely with the administration, and that we're starting to see that come together a little bit more now over time. There are still that siloed, there's still areas around the country that are siloed between law enforcement and school administrations. But as far as school safety is concerned, they're starting to really come together and synergize. So as you can see here, that level 1, intent is not apparent. There's no evidence of motive or no ability. So what can you do here? Maybe that's a kid looking, or a person, maybe they graduated 10 years ago, that is going through a tough time, just trying to basically get attention on social media. The law enforcement can deal with that, or if it happens to be a kid within your school, as you as a student might be able to rehabilitate that child, or have a parent-teacher conference, figure out what's going on. At the end of the day, we want to keep teachers safe, and we want to keep students safe. You guys are building their lives. You're creating a human being, right? So we want to know what's going on. Level 2, there's an intent expressed. What are the responses there, right? So it goes all the way to response level 3, where there's an imminent threat to a school, and maybe there's a lockdown that's happened. I was telling Scott, Florida Atlantic University last year had a graduation ceremony planned, and a bomb threat came through on Twitter. They discovered it just a few hours before the ceremony, so they immediately sent out a tweet and a post and said, this is postponed until further notice, until they can determine that that threat is not imminent and not real. I think the key there is that it wasn't a real threat, but they were able to take action so that, that if it was going to be a real threat, nothing would have happened. They were able to take control of a scenario otherwise someone could not be controlled, So, again, parent meeting or whatever we need to do as far as school safety plan. Something that I like to think about and do with every state that I talk to. So I typically talk to diffusion centers and departments of Homeland Security. And what I do is I create these scenarios, right? So yes, from a state level, you want everyone to have something like this as far as threat detection and alerting, so that your response time can be better. In the fire service, we use certain solutions so that we can improve our response time. So each county obviously operates differently. So what you need to do is figure out what is your threat detection and response plan, and then outside of just those locations, what is that administration? Are there folks that you think people are potentially going to make threats against? That my organization and our solution does that, right? So we are scanning for any threats across social media and the deep and dark web. So a lot of times we have organizations that come to us and say, we're not sure, this email may have been compromised, we don't know, we're scanning the dark web, and we'll actually pick up that the email that he may have used to log into Amazon or his Walmart account, and it was posted on the dark web and his password was compromised. We've seen scenarios where politicians had their VIN numbers posted on the dark web, and then you go to your state register and you can post that VIN number in and get your home address. So there's a lot of different ways for a bad actor to post information, get information, and take whatever action they want. So knowing about it and having a detection system to ultimately alert you of that so that you guys can put the right people in place to take action is what we're looking for. And that's pretty much everything I wanted to go through. I want to leave just a few minutes for questions for either side.
One of the things I wanted to talk on, I'm married with a 13-year-old and 16-year-old. I handle
the Crimes Against Children program for the FBI Memphis division for years. What was the advice I used to give parents? You know, put the computer in a room with public access, always look over their shoulders. Does that work anymore? Absolutely not. Now, my 13-year-old and 16-year-old don't have an expectation of privacy on their devices. I look at it every once in a while, and I can't believe the stupid crap that they're looking at, but I'm more concerned about, you know, that I'm going to see things like, I know I'm going to have to deal with it eventually, and I'm not even talking about porn. I'm talking about, you know, really bad behavior where they're killing small animals or they're doing things like that. And so often when I'm going out and I'm talking to parents about that, because I spend a lot of time still educating parents, and the average parent goes like this to me: I check my kids' text every single day. And I go, that's great. But the average 13-year-old does not use text messaging to communicate with themselves. They're using all of these different types of apps. And they're like, well, give me the top 10. And I'm like, it just doesn't matter. We have to have those discussions. And right now, whenever I go out and I talk to 8th graders and I talk about the stupid choices that they can make, because back in 1985, when I went to high school, I mean, you know, a party was, you know, I'm glad, and I don't want to make any jokes about background investigations because I know that's a very sensitive subject right now. But luckily, when I was a kid, there were no cameras on cell phones. And, you know, my teachers used to yell at me all the time, that's going to go on your permanent record card. And I knew they were full of it. But today, kids have a permanent record card. What is that? Social media. I had to really sit down with my nieces when they were in their early 20s because they were both teachers trying to explain, you know, maybe it's not the greatest idea in the world to go out to these cocktail parties downing drinks as a teacher. I know no teachers would ever do anything. I'm saying hypothetically that teachers would do that. But these are the things that we have to do, and it's really difficult for people to kind of get that information. Because I'm all over my kids, and if I was going to say that I had complete control over what my kids do online, I'm kidding. I mean, they're going to figure things out. There's so much, you know, it's like with me when I was a kid, I was able to figure everything out. I shouldn't have any doubt about it on my parents. Going back to the cybercrime stuff, I just kind of glossed over a couple of things, but I really do have a good list that come get my card on 15 really basic and simple points that you need to do that are the cyber hygiene, because it does not matter how much money you spend on information security, on keeping your stuff safe. If you are not doing the basics and you are not doing the fundamentals, you are still going to be victimized. And in a nutshell, it's really coming down to the most important takeaway is two-factor authentication on all your personal platforms. Having separate mission-critical passwords. We cannot have the same password for every single account. We need to think before we click. We need to become a human firewall. We really need to, and I'll send you some documents on the business email compromise, which in my opinion is a business process issue. $15 billion worth of fraud. I'm going to give you guys my business cards because I have one goal here today. That is to make sure that you are not the victim of a cybercrime incident without you spending a dime and having to go out and buy anything. Because in my opinion, there's no such thing as a solution. You need to do the basics and fundamentals. Now, Doug and I have thrown a ton of information out at you. I will give you guys my business cards after. We're going to stick around. I want to see, since you were such a talkative crowd, I want to see if anyone here has any questions or comments. Don't all call out at once. It's rude. But you, yes?
Are you seeing any school divisions build and adopt cybersecurity policies from top down?
That's a great question, because when I go out and I speak to organizations all the time, I always
go like this. If you think information security starts with your technology department, it's going to fail. So what do companies do? They hire a dedicated information security guy, and you know who he is? The dedicated fall guy. Information security starts at the highest level within an organization, and if you cannot get buy-in at the highest level within the organization, it is not going to exist. And let me tell you, I used to say this within the FBI all the time, we are not going to arrest our way out of the problem. And the thing that I tell corporate America, you are not going to spend your way out of the problem. So starting it with the top, I don't know if you've seen on anything that you're dealing with them starting at the top level.
Yeah, so right now, a lot of organizations that I'm working with, we talked about threat scanning and detection for administration and schools. I work with a number of organizations that are concerned about disgruntled employees or threats against executives. So we are doing scans for any threats, not just within the headquarter locations, but outside of that. For instance, I work with a county in Kentucky for schools, and they have the same name high school as a place in Austin, Texas. A threat was made across Twitter, and the folks in Kentucky got that alert because at the end of the day, the threats can be made anywhere on social media, and someone can drive to do something. And that threat was made against the principal of a school. So, understanding who's the hierarchy, who could be potential victims, and putting the right solutions in place and practices in place to keep those folks safe is what we're seeing from the top down. Outside of that, we work with some privatized prisons that, obviously right now is a very big protest time frame. And some of the protest groups are trying to hinder prisoner transfer, maybe storm some of the headquarters. They're concerned with some of the executives being threatened because of some of the practices and ICE controversies that are going on. So we did end up detecting a threat for a prisoner transfer, and they were able to reroute a bus. Ultimately, that puts the entire community at risk if a bus carrying prisoners is hindered from moving and transferring. So there's different ways as far as utilizing a solution from the top down to make sure everyone is safe within that particular location.
Well, come up, I have my cards over here.
I will send you, I have a great document on ransomware, on the business email compromise, and a couple of other basic things. You just come get the documents. If they turn into an HTML file that asks for your password, that's a scam. I can't believe nobody thought that was funny. All right, I'm done. I'm going to quit. No, but please come up. And like I said, my goal here is to make sure that you don't become the next victim. And I want to thank my friends in the Virginia
Department of Education, everyone bringing me down here to speak with you guys. Thank you so much, and have a great day.